Last year, on December the 26th, Nigel Hawthorne died of a heart attack after an 18-month battle with cancer. When I heard the news, I knew that the acting community had lost a great artist, and I'd lost a friend. We worked together on The Madness of King George, and I experienced the remarkable abilities that made Nigel the great actor that he was. In that defining role, he carried the film and all of us with him. This omnibus documentary you're going to see tonight is about Nigel's life and career. It was filmed over 4 months in 1999, and in spite of being a modest man who guarded his privacy, he opens up and is easy with the camera. It was clear that Nigel was at a remarkable peak of a long and successful career. It was a happy time for him before the cancer took hold. But it was also a time of intense work as he prepared to take on the role of King Lear, which was to be the last major stage performance of his career. As you will see from the film, even though he was not yet ill, he'd thought about death. Inevitable, perhaps, when you're playing King Lear. But even in the months that followed, in the worst moments of his illness, Nigel was confident he would get better. And it was much too soon for him to go. He died at his home in Hertfordshire, in the company of his partner, Trevor Bentham. This film is a tribute to Nigel and his work.
"1999 was a watershed year for Nigel Hawthorne. It began with a knighthood, honouring his many great performances on stage and screen. From his role in the award-winning sitcom Yes, Minister, to his Oscar-nominated performance in the film The Madness of King George, Nigel Hawthorne's career has encompassed everything from sitcom to Shakespeare. But now, at the age of 70, he faces the greatest challenge of his career, playing King Lear in the Anglo-Japanese production which opened in Tokyo and transfers to London for the Royal Shakespeare Company's Millennium season. But Nigel Hawthorne's success has been hard-won. Until he found fame at the age of 50 with Yes, Minister, he had endured almost 30 years struggling for recognition as an actor.
Now, you see, having reached the age of 70, I just want to do something new. I just feel that there's something, and I want to find new areas before it's too late. I suppose I'm trying to make up for lost time, really.
This can be white. Yeah.
Oh, it can be white. In my case, certainly it's been a late development, but I don't know whether I'd have been able to handle it if it had come earlier, if I'd been successful earlier. My personality might not have been able to cope with it. I was a terrible mess as a young man. Would love to have been more relaxed, more at ease.
Although born in this country, Nigel Hawthorne grew up in South Africa. At 19, he decided to pursue a stage career, but South Africa offered limited opportunities. So in 1951, he decided to return to Britain.
We had no money as a family. My dad, when I left Cape Town, just said, "I'm sorry, I've got nothing that I can give you to help." So I arrived in England with £12, and it was stupid, I know. I just had to keep working and try and find a way of making a living.
But for years, Nigel was to struggle through a round of failed auditions, humiliating bit parts and unemployment.
You know, I got to the point where I wanted to give up, and I just couldn't understand why I was doing it. But I knew that I really needed to justify to my father and my mother too my choice of career, because they'd been very against it. I think my mother had been softer about it than Dad. When occasionally he did write to me, and I suppose in the first 6 years I was away I had 2 letters maybe, and they were always scribbled on the back of one of my mother's letters, and ended up "Best love, Dad." And there were things like, you know, if things aren't going well, you can always come home. And I suppose those are the sort of things that like red rag to a bull to me. And I would say, no, I'm not coming back.
Nigel and I shared a dressing room together, and he was always very intense and very keen, but he'd get very despairing because we both had one thing in common. We'd both slogged away, me for 20 years, him for 15, and got absolutely nowhere.
Jimmy was always going on about the scripts he was writing and how everybody was terribly excited about them, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I bet. And he wrote something, he said, about the Home Guard and the BBC were considering, and I thought, and I remember saying at the time, oh, it sounds wonderful, Jimmy, that was great, Greg, and I'm thinking, comedy series about the Home Guard. And anyway, that turned out to be Dad's Army.
Who do you think you are kidding, Mr. Hitler?
And then years later, I bumped into him, and he asked me if I'd like to be in it. And I could hardly speak, I was so thrilled.
I said to David, I've just seen Nigel Hawthorne. He said, who's Nigel Hawthorne? I said, marvellous actor. Fantastic.
Salesman, yeah.
Not So I said, I had a long talk with him, and he's absolutely finished. He's fed up. He's going back to South Africa. He said, 15 years of struggling, and he wants to get back in the sun. I said, it's nice to give him a part. And Dave said, oh, yeah.
And the script arrived, and it was one line, and it was on a couple of weeks ago, in fact. And it was, yeah, that's my bike, I had to say.
Fraser, bend his legs.
Did you tell one of your blokes to take my bike?
Yes, I did. What about it?
What about it? You can't go around taking private property.
Look here, this is an emergency. I'm a captain in the Home Guard. Bend the brown!
Well, we shot the scene, and he was a bit unsteady, actually, because he was nervous, because we only got a tiny part. It's awful. And so we finally put it in the can, and I turned to Jim and I said, this friend of yours, he's not very good, is he?
A lot of people rise above it. And I don't think I was ever able to, quite. I always got sort of mortified and wounded and went into hiding because of it. And I suppose that was very much my nature.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. Straight and narrow. Making do, getting by, just.
You don't have to tell me, son.
No. Well, I got a fairly decent job now. I sell bathroom tiles. Car goes with it, expenses. It's not much, but it's honest. And you sleep at night.
There are actors that you know they're going to struggle as a young actor, but you know that they're around about 35, 40, because they're not pretty. You know, they're not, and there's something substantial about them, even at the age of 18 or 19, that really militates against a lot of roles for young people. But you know that if they can just hang on in there, that when they're in their late 30s, early 40s is when things are really going to cook for them.
I think that happens to people who get more interesting as they get older. And also because he never looked like a sort of shining juvenile. Some people don't look like that. It's a lot to do with looks and how you then project yourself.
I think his luck changed because he got a role that suited him terribly well, and that was at Yes Minister, in which he was totally brilliant, quite wonderful. And he made the programme. So it just shows that, you know, you've got to keep going and wait until the great opportunity arrives.
At last, in 1979, Nigel Hawthorne got the big break he'd been waiting for as the pompous civil servant Sir Humphrey Appleby in what was to become one of Britain's most popular sitcoms.
It was a joy. We got on straight away, and the scripts were brilliant, and 7 years just flashed by, really. I wish we were still doing it in many ways.
Minister, allow me to present Sir Humphrey Appleby, Permanent Under-Secretary of State and head of the DAA.
Hello, Sir Humphrey.
Hello and welcome.
Thank you, Sir Humphrey.
I believe you know each other.
Yes, we did cross swords when the Minister gave me a grilling over the estimates in the Public Accounts Committee last
I wouldn't
year.
say that.
Well, you came up with all the questions I hoped nobody would ask.
Well, opposition's about asking awkward questions.
And government is about not answering them.
Well, you answered all mine anyway.
I'm glad you thought so, Minister.
I think his performance in Yes Minister was successful because it was serious. Of course it was comedic, but he never played it comedically. He played it absolutely seriously, and actually it was quite a scary character too, wasn't he? He was a very intimidating character and a very controlling character.
We are the flower of government, Bernard. Local government may be a dunghill, but it grows beautiful roses.
You mean...
Yes, that's right, friend. But if we try to clean up the dunghill and lose our balance,
we land in the...
Yes, Minister, and its sequel, Yes, Prime Minister, was seen in over 30 countries, and even Margaret Thatcher declared it her favourite programme. At last, Nigel Hawthorne was able to pick and choose the parts he wanted.
They know what to expect from us. They know that we're not afraid. We shall triumph, Mr. Harding. We shall triumph.
Well, there's nothing major wrong with me, thank God. Just slight inflammation of the tubes, which attacks me from time to time.
No, it's nothing. It rather suits you. I think people often like tacking labels like a comic actor, a serious actor onto people. And that's okay, but it's also quite boring and quite limiting. Because an actor of Nigel's stature is obviously larger than just that. You know, they go together. A tragic actor, a comic actor, if you've got that sort of depth, and he has.
But it was on stage that Nigel Hawthorne first showed the emotional intensity of which he was capable. In Shadowlands, he played Oxford Don C.S. Lewis, who fell in love late in life with an American divorcee, only to lose her to cancer.
Towards the end of the rehearsals, when we were into running the play, Nigel was so affected by the emotion of having to tell this little boy about his mother's death, or about being brave so that the both of them could carry on. Nigel himself broke down and cried. In fact, he went on crying well past, I suppose, what could be considered a comfortable time, so much so that even though my character by then was dead, I just got up and walked into the middle of the scene and put my arms around him, because it was not C.S. Lewis that was crying, it was Nigel.
But in spite of the acclaim he received in Shadowlands and his success in television drama, Nigel Hawthorne was rejected for the film role, which went instead to Anthony Hopkins, considered a safer bet at the box office.
I think 10 years ago, possibly a lot more than now, British actors understood that if a play was going to be turned into a film, a Hollywood film, then it wasn't even within our thinking that it could come to us.
And it looked as though it would happen again with the stage play, The Madness of George III, in which Nigel Hawthorne played the title role. When the film was proposed, he was so convinced he would lose out again, he decided to take a gamble in Hollywood.
I'd assumed that Tony Hopkins would be given the part. And then Joel Silver, who was the big action movie producer in Hollywood, had been to see the stage version at the National and offered me this character, Cocteau, in Demolition Man. And I thought that might give me some viability in America.
I did see The Demolition Man. It's truly a forgettable movie. And I think there were 95 people who could have played that part. I can't think of anybody who could have done George. I thought it was brilliant.